white, dressed in green, back to normal. And today's reading of the Gospel reading is about this great miracle, the first miracle of Jesus, the beginning of his ministry, where he converts water into wine at the wedding of Cana. So since we're talking about miracles, I want to tell you a story about a miracle. So there was this famous healer, this was a priest. He went around the world offering healing services. So one time he's at a church, and after he finished his service, at the end, he says, anybody who wants to be healed, come up to the front, and I'll pray over you. So this man, his name is John. So John comes, and the priest says, John, what do you want me to pray for you? He said, Father, can you pray for my hearing? So the priest put both hands around his ears, closed his eyes, and prayed a long prayer for about a minute. And after he was done, he said, John, how's your hearing now? John said, Father, I don't know, my hearing is next week at the courthouse. My brothers and sisters, like I said, today we celebrate the second Sunday in Ordinary Time with Jesus' first miracle and one of the most famous miracles of Jesus in the Bible, the changing of water into wine at the wedding of Cana. John, in his Gospel, tells us that Jesus, his disciples, and his mother Mary were all in attendance. I can't just imagine this was a great wedding feast. This miracle is now more vivid in my mind since my wife and I went to, we renewed our vows in Cana back in 2019. So turning water into wine really happened, as we have heard in today's Gospel reading. The story of a marriage feast at Cana we hear in today's Gospel is narrated only by John. The event has made a deep impression on John, as it happened only a few days after him and some of the disciples had decided to follow Jesus. At this wedding, he witnessed the first miracle worked by the Lord, which must have impressed him a great deal. It is possible that at the time, he could have been writing the Gospel. And John chooses to emphasize this unique miracle as a special one and the first sign. John refers to this miracle as a sign, which takes place in the village of Cana in Galilee, which is a beautiful area. My wife and I fell in love with the area. This is the hometown of the disciple Nathanael, but otherwise a very insignificant place. Cana was located very near to Nazareth. This miracle is the first of John's series of signs by which Jesus manifested his power and glory during his public ministry. I have read that probably the disciples who accompanied Jesus were Andrew, Peter, James and John, Philip and Nathanael. And of course, our Blessed Mother was there present. Joseph is not mentioned, he may have probably been dead by then. And it is possible that Mary was a relative or close friend of the family because she shows deep interest in the needs and the events and the shortcomings of the family. She even seems to have some authority in the house as she gives orders to servants and acts as an assistant to the wedding director. At the wedding in Cana, we see that Jesus revealed his divinity power by his first miracle, transforming water into wine. The Bible is a story of a wedding. It begins with one wedding, that of Adam and Eve in the garden, and it ends in another marriage, that of the supper of the Lamb that we read in Revelation. Throughout the Bible, marriage is a symbol of the covenant relationship between God and his chosen people. God is the faithful groom, and the church is his beloved bride. It was not an accident that Jesus' first miracle occurred in the context of a wedding. We see this theme of wedding beautifully presented in today's first reading as well, where Isaiah uses the symbol of spousal love to describe God's love for Israel. God's fidelity to his people is compared to a husband's fidelity to his wife. By our baptism, each of us has been betrothed to Christ as a bride, to her groom. The purpose of our lives as a church is to become the bride of Christ and to be present at the wedding feast of the Lamb, the heavenly banquet that we read about in Revelation. Again, in today's Gospel, John describes the first signs by which Jesus showed forth his divinity. When the wine ran short, Jesus' mother told him about it. At first, Jesus seemed to refuse to do anything about it. But later, he told the servants to fill 6 large stone jars with water and take some of the miraculous made wine to the head waiter. When they did so, the head waiter expressed his surprise that such great wine had been reserved for such a late use. You know, I got to tell you a little bit about those weddings back in those days. In those days, the weddings would last about a whole week, and the groom was supposed to provide for the wine. And they would serve always a good wine at the beginning of the week, and when they run short, the cheap wine would come later. And if they ran out of wine, that was a big insult on the guests, because they expected wine for the whole week. So it was very surprising for the head waiter when they bring this later wine and it's better than the original wine. So a foretaste of the eternal heavenly banquet or eternal wedding feast is the Eucharist. The Eucharist. And during the Eucharist, Jesus turns the bread and wine into his body and blood in order to feed us and so that we can become his bride. So let us make every Sunday, my brothers and sisters, Eucharist into a special meal to share with one another as Jesus did. Let us bring to us a sense of togetherness with those around us or strangers who happen to be present with us. Finally, we know that Mary was there present at the wedding of Cana. Her intervention saved the day. Her words to the sermon are still highly meaningful for us. Do whatever he tells you. Mary here really represents the church, and it is through the church that Christ comes into our lives, and through the church that we go to him. Second graders, we're reading about the wedding feast of Cana and the miracle of Jesus turning the water into wine. And after explaining the story, the teacher asked the kids, "What did you learn about the story?" Only one hand went up, and the teacher asked, "Tell me, Tommy, what did you learn?" And Tommy says, "I learned that I should invite Jesus and Mary to my wedding." And everyone laughed like you guys did now. But how true this is. In fact, we all need to invite Jesus and Mary not only to our wedding, but to our homes in our day-to-day lives. Today, the sad news is more than 50% of marriages end up in divorce because the couples forget to invite Jesus and Mary to their weddings. And when the wine of the initial love is finished, there's no one to replenish with more and better wine. We are called upon today to emulate both the example of Jesus and Mary, who used their gifts for the growth and edification of the people of God. Also, we must constantly ask Our Lady for intercession as those at the wedding did. Most importantly, we must be ready to take her advice. Do whatever he tells you. My brothers and sisters, it is my most profound desire to be with you all at the wedding feast of the Lamb, the heavenly banquet. May God bless you. I love you all.